FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Let's cut to a particular chase here, Steve. It's something I thought we'd talk about later, but since it came up now, and that is Darwin and race you talk about. And you had to sort of put entre guillemets, you had to put in quotes the wild Malay, the Negro. Because obviously Darwin, in thinking about race, spoke a language, had a vocabulary, which is no longer our vocabulary necessarily. It's a vocabulary of an earlier time. And yet one of the most sensitive, tender, difficult, contentious issues in Darwinism and understanding Darwin is Darwin's attitude about race. Because one of the things that comes up again and again, I'm sure you found this as I have in going around the country with this book, is that the claim that Darwin himself was inherently racist is then extrapolated to the claim that Darwinism itself is inherently racist, which is one of the reasons why evolutionary biologists want to get out from under Darwin. And it comes from two directions. It comes both from the direction of the creationist right, to dub it that way, that is, who want to show that there's something anti-universalist about Darwin. And it also comes from the left, who want to show that Darwinism doesn't lead by accident to social Darwinism, to the belief in eugenics and into various ugly kinds of 20th century racism, but that it leads logically into that kind of into eugenics and into the ugliest sides of 20th century history. So that you end up, and the problem is, and this is where I'm sympathetic to the evolutionary biologists who in a certain sense want to be free of Darwin, is that there are two actually separate issues. One is what did Darwin believe, and the other is what does evolutionary biology show now on this issue. But let me leave the second part of it to you, because you know far more about it than I do. But the first part of it, I do think, is a falsehood in plain English. That is to say, that if you look at what Darwin actually says about the question of race, and most notably or notoriously, depending on your point of view, in The Descent of Man, he toys with the idea of race. That is, he takes seriously the idea that the races of man might be separate in the way that that species might first, or that subspecies of any creature might be. And he toys with that idea, and he plays with it. And if you take out those sections of Descent of Man, you can find, in some sense, incriminating passages. But having played with it and having toyed with it, he rejects it. He rejects it quite explicitly. He rejects it on two grounds. One, he rejects it on the ground, it seems to me at least, that there's no evidence for it. That is to say that, so far as you can tell by any rational standard, all human beings belong to a single race. They interbreed, they have all the characteristics of a race. They all have essentially the same mental powers, and they all have essentially the same abilities. And that the two key things that separate, it's certainly true, I think, that Darwin is what one might call a civilizationist. That is, he believes that Western civilization, and perhaps even the Victorian subspecies of Western civilization, is better than tribal civilization, tribal culture. He does believe that. But he believes that the difference is entirely non-genetic. He believes that the difference is education and learning and what we would call cultural acquisitions in the first place. And then he also believes that that the key human capacity, the key human gift, is sympathy. And he talks about that a great deal. He says sympathy has probably evolved for some useful social reason, because it enables a group of Homo sapiens to have a competitive advantage over some other group. They're used to working together. They like each other. They get engaged. But then he says very beautifully, but once you have sympathy, there's nothing to limit your application of it. There's nothing that prevents you from expanding it as you like to whatever social group you choose to. And he says that the goal of civilization should be for us to expand our circle of compassion, so to speak, our capacity for sympathy as broadly as we possibly can.